My absolute favorite thing about Steam is the reviews page, because anyone who owns the game can leave a negative review and they can say anything that their heart could possibly desire about the game. But sometimes these reviews can be a lifesaver, especially when the game in question has that juicy, overwhelmingly negative review score that only a handful of games have ever managed to achieve. Because for a game to be reviewed as overwhelmingly negative, it has to be so bad, such an enormous failure, such a horrific dumpster fire, that not even ironic meme positive reviews can save it from being the absolute bottom of the barrel. And because I'm a bit of a masochist, I read this tag and I see it as an invitation. So I decided to buy the 5 most negatively reviewed games on the entirety of Steam to see just what they had to do to earn this illustrious, overwhelmingly negative tag. Because believe me, some of these get completely insane. And coming in at number 5, we have Overwatch 2 was added to Steam in August of 2023, but as I'm sure you all know, Overwatch 2 is much older than that. It actually released in 2022. It was just exclusive to Blizzard's Battle.net launcher before it was added to Steam, just the same as Overwatch 1 was. And when Blizzard planned to put Overwatch 2 on Steam, Blizzard's employees were all warning the higher-ups at the company that the game was going to be review bombed. They knew it'd be review bombed, and they wanted to be able to mitigate it as best as they possibly could. But Bobby Kotick, the genius that he is, he was like, nah, it'll be fine. Nah, trust. Just release it on Steam. Just trust me. What a surprise. Who could have possibly seen this coming? It got review bombed so hard that it now has more negative reviews than any other game on the entirety of Steam. The only reason this game's number 5 on the list instead of number 1 is because the games in this video will be ranked based on the percentage of positive to negative reviews. You might think that's weird, but trust me, it makes the video more interesting. And as much as this game did get heavily review bombed, the reasons why it was review bombed were incredibly deserved. I have actually already made a video about this that goes into a lot more detail, but I'm still gonna go over it here anyway. A lot of the reviews are angry about the new and more predatory monetization that Overwatch 2 has that Overwatch 1 didn't have. Pay $60 for Overwatch, no updates for 3 years, same game gets released as Overwatch 2, characters locked behind Battle Pass. I somehow purchased Overwatch 1 for $40, which Blizzard then deleted and created this predatory microtransaction simulator instead. I cried at the part where Reaper said bye and locked the new heroes behind a battle pass and scrapped the story mode. In Overwatch 1, the only microtransactions were for cosmetics. Anything that affected gameplay was completely free to the user with no way to pay for any benefits. But in Overwatch 2, all of that changed. Suddenly, the new heroes were locked behind a battle pass, and you could theoretically unlock them all for free, but it took such an insane amount of grinding that it was unrealistic for most people. Overwatch 1 was already a game people enjoyed, and the majority of the changes that went into Overwatch 2 were just Blizzard trying to milk more money out of the players' pockets. But the real reason Overwatch 2 was created in the first place was apparently to make a brand new PvE mode, a whole new way of playing Overwatch. Or at least that was in theory anyway. Overwatch 2 was supposed to have PvE. It's the reason the game was made. It was scrapped, and now we have a shell of what it originally was. It begs for your money, heroes are now locked behind a battle pass. They essentially scrapped everything they promised for PvE and downgraded the game and are slowly reintroducing aspects of the first game and calling them updates. They forgot to add content for 3 years. Overwatch 2 has no respect for you. It's an attempt to pry open your wallet while masquerading as the game it used to be. Turns out the game it used to be is Overwatch 1, because don't let that sleek shiny logo fool you. Overwatch 2 is a sequel in name alone. This game could have easily been a moderately sized update for the original game, and it would have been just fine, but they made it a sequel with the promise that PvE would be coming to the game eventually. And yet the PvE never came, or at least the PvE at the scale that it was promised at never came. It got cancelled because the higher-ups at Blizzard didn't want to allocate the resources to it, because Bobby Kotick is a money-hungry piece of shit, basically. But then there's the reviews that aren't about the game itself, but are instead about Blizzard as a company. Scam your customers with false advertised garbage games, molest female employees, sell out your pro players to Chinese overlords, molest female employees. The devs respect their players as much as they respect the women in their office. I hope Bobby Kotick dies in excruciating Jesus Christ. I don't know which Blizzard treats worse, its players or its female employees. Just for the record, by the way, it's the female employees. It's obviously the female employees. Blizzard has a long and disgusting history of workplace harassment. A history so long and complicated that summing it up in just this video is basically impossible. But I'm sure you've all heard the stories, and I'm sure you've all read about it on the internet when it was a newer story. But as it turns out, when you harass your female employees and make a terrible product, people don't really like that very much. Like, at least when Riot Games harasses their female employees, they do it whilst making products that people actually like. Now, the final reason Overwatch 2 has so many negative reviews is actually one you might not expect, and I'd love to read them to you, but I can't, because they're all written in Chinese. You see, Blizzard used to work with a company in China called NetEase for the best part of 15 years. They did this to bring their games to the Chinese market, since strict censorship laws in China make it hard for Western companies to bring their games to China on their own. NetEase was essentially a distributor for Overwatch 2 in China, and they hosted servers there too. But in late 2022, Blizzard's deal with NetEase expired and didn't get renewed. And in January of 2023, all of the Chinese servers for Overwatch 2 went offline permanently. That's every single Chinese person's Blizzard account shut down overnight. Billions of hours and billions of dollars spent evaporated in an instant, and Blizzard's games haven't returned to China since. So a massive number of the negative reviews for Overwatch 2 are Chinese people complaining about their lost accounts and their inability to play Overwatch on their own servers anymore, as well as, you know, complaining about all the stuff that the English reviews were complaining about. So all of that combined landed Overwatch 2 in the number 5 spot for most negatively reviewed games on all of Steam. And in fact, Overwatch 2 was so hated and so heavily review bombed that the other 4 games on this list actually have positive reviews that say stuff like this. Better than Overwatch 2, doing my part to keep Overwatch 2 on the bottom, helping Overwatch 2 stay as the worst reviewed game on Steam. Overwatch 2 shall inherit the lowest rated throne, still better than Overwatch 2. People were so mad about Overwatch 2 and Blizzard as a whole that they were leaving positive reviews on the other most negatively reviewed Steam games to try and skew their review scores and make Overwatch 2 take the top spot. That's dedication right there, baby. That's how you know Overwatch 2 is a special type of dogshit. Now, Flatout 3 is an interesting one, because every other game on this list has some sort of drama about it. There's something unique about it that makes it truly deserving of its overwhelmingly negative title. But Flatout 3 doesn't have any of that. It has this rating purely and simply because it's just really, really bad. No extra details, no hidden gossip, it just really, really sucks ass. It's a driving game where the driving controls feel really, really bad. There's a bunch of game modes, but they're all incredibly shallow, and you can experience everything there is to see in about 5 minutes per game mode. Visually, the game is completely hideous. The collision detection's awful, it's buggy, it just feels like complete arse to play. And when it released, all the big game critic websites were in agreement that this game was one of the worst games they'd ever reviewed. Edge magazine gave it a 1 out of 10 score, a score so low that they've only ever given it to 2 games in their entire history. Eurogamer also gave it a 1 out of 10, citing a lot of the same reasons as Edge magazine. GamesMaster, they also gave it a 1 out of 10. In fact, the highest review rating you can find anywhere is a 5 out of 10 from GameSpot. And these people at GameSpot are clearly smoking some like crazy unfiltered crack, because 5 out of 10 is a medium, average, middle of the road score. And this game is no average game. And the part that sucks about this game the most is that Flatout 3 is a sequel. It's the third installment in the Flatout franchise. But Flatout 1 and 2, they're really good games. Flatout 3 just flat out sucks massive balls. Now, the reasoning behind why it sucks so hard is actually very easy to see. The team that made the first two Flatout games, called Bugbear Entertainment, were not the people who made the third game. Bugbear sold the IP to a company called Team 6 Studios, and they made the third installment in the franchise. They're a small company that you might not have heard of, but they're known for just churning out garbage racing games as fast as they possibly can. They often release multiple games per year. They released 7 games in 2010 and 4 more games in 2011, one of which was Flatout 3. So it's no surprise that this game didn't exactly get much development time invested into it. Making 1 game a year is pretty crazy output. So clearly they spend about 3 weeks per game, then they just chuck that shit at the wall and hope it sticks. So Flatout 3's disastrous launch was down to a new developer not giving it the attention it deserves. And the Steam reviews page has not let this lack of quality go unpunished. The game name says Flatout, but do not think of it as Flatout. It's not even made by the same developers. This is made by Team 6. Team 6 has not made a good game ever. It's bad. I used to believe it was good. I was stupid at the time. Practiced safe sex my entire adult life only to get AIDS playing this complete abomination. When my kids misbehave, I make them play this as punishment. This game made me racist. Get it? Racist? Racing? Racist? I'd rather get railed by 4 Jesus Christ. I support global warming so that Team 6 Studios in the Netherlands sinks faster into the ocean. The sheer lack of quality of the game, combined with the general consensus from critics all around, combined with the disappointment that die-hard Flatout fans felt when they bought the game, all combines into a game that only 17% of players reviewed positively. And most of the positive reviews look something like this. So, you know, grain of salt. Command & Conquer 4 is a once popular RTS franchise that started out in the 90s, but the company that made it originally, Westwood Studios, was acquired by EA in 1998. EA owns this franchise. Of course they do, and in 2010, in classic EA fashion, they made a bunch of terrible decisions all in a row that led to them creating the third most negatively reviewed game on all of Steam. For starters, this game was poorly received by die-hard Command & Conquer fans, even on launch. It had changed the game drastically. Command & Conquer was usually a classic RTS game, but Tiberian Twighlight had removed all of the resource gathering and base building mechanics from the game, taking the series in an entirely new direction that nobody liked or asked for. You also had to play a bunch of single-player stuff just to be able to unlock certain units. You even have to make an EA account to be able to play it at all, which unironically feels like a massive slap in the face. Like, EA's executives with that one, they're just pointing and laughing at any moron who was tricked into buying this dogshit game. They also made it a sort of pseudo co-op game, which again, no one asked for. The game was so different from all that came before it, and didn't really make up for it with any new additions that were exciting either. It was a failure on every possible level. Although on the plus side, it does have these super epic live action cutscenes that are definitely not incredibly corny and overacted. But that's not the only reason why this game is so negatively reviewed. This game is pretty bad, but it's not so bad to be the third most negatively reviewed game on all of Steam. The real thing that pushes this game over the edge, and the reason it's so massively review bombed on Steam, is because EA had the genius idea to make this game a forced always online game. If you didn't have an internet connection, you literally couldn't even load the game, not even the single player missions. And then in 2020, EA shut down the servers for the game permanently. So even if you were one of the few people that liked this game and thought it was worth playing, even you can't play this game. The game with forced online DRM no longer had any servers, so it was just unplayable. And yet it was still for sale on Steam. It even had discounts when Steam sales came around. And the only way to know it was an unplayable game was to go through the negative reviews beforehand. And warnings about the servers being shut down wasn't the only thing you'd find in these reviews. The worst disgrace EA has ever published. Take a 20-year-old strategy series with countless great games, grind it to dust, remove key elements of the entire genre, make it pseudo co-op multiplayer online only, and watch it all burn to the ground. Utter wank. How to Kill a Franchise by EA. No one wants to play that garbage game. No one wants to acknowledge the existence of that garbage game. No one even wants to count it as canon as far as storyline goes because it's a garbage game.
Look how they massacred my boy.
Uninstall works fine, 11 out of 10. Now, it is worth noting that at some point between 2020 and now, EA seems to have somewhat fixed this issue, because when I bought this game, I was able to load up some of the single-player missions, and in trying to Google it, I couldn't find just exactly when this was fixed. Also, the menu shows you people who are online for some reason, but none of the multiplayer functionality works when you try and use it, so clearly the servers are dead, so I don't know why this is even here, to be honest. But this game is just a complete dumpster fire. It changed a ton of stuff that completely alienated fans of the franchise, or even just fans of the genre in general, and then it became completely unplayable to the small handful of people who actually thought it was a good game. This is classic EA, truly a work of art. Good job, you guys. Honestly, I'm not even sure where to start with Identity. It was made by a dev team of 2 people that call themselves Asylum Entertainment, and this game is such a travesty, such a disgusting pile of garbage, that I'm well and truly shocked that you can still buy this. The fact that it hasn't been taken off Steam is unironically unbelievable, and what's even more unbelievable is that this game is in 2nd place. It's not even the most negatively reviewed game on Steam. Identity was an MMORPG that promised to be the next big thing. It was going to be a life simulator. Everything would be player owned, including houses, businesses, cars, even tattoo parlors and art galleries that had player created art. Art that could be sold to other players. You could get jobs and work 9 to 5 in the world. You could become a policeman or a criminal overlord. Identity was quite literally promising the world. And all of this promise was made on their Kickstarter page that they set up in 2015. They asked for 150,000 Canadian dollars, a goal that they broke relatively quickly, reaching almost $190,000. The Kickstarter page claimed that this money was to get across the finish line, as if to insinuate that they had been working on the game for a while, spending their own money on it in the process. The page also mentions some mysterious outside investors too, and one of their Kickstarter tiers was for $5,000, which offered tons of things, including a tour of their offices to spend half the day gaming with the team. And 5 people actually paid this, giving $5,000 of their own money to this Kickstarter page, believing that Identity would be the next big thing. When the Kickstarter goal was reached, they went relatively quiet, not really showing any of their progress whatsoever. But the Kickstarter closing wasn't the end of their fundraising attempts. Oh no. They had their own website where you could pre-order the game and also donate to them personally. And they raised a whopping $1.4 million from personal donations from excited players who wanted to see this amazing game come to life. But as the promised beta release date came and went, people started to get concerned. They dropped a handful of early sneak peek videos to the community, but they were incredibly few and far between. And what you did get to see wasn't exactly exciting anyway. And then in November of 2018, 2 years after the originally announced release date, Identity was finally released in early access. And I'm sure you can imagine, it was a complete and utter disaster. Identity was a complete and utter scam. Everything that was promised was a lie. The amount of money that they had been donated was absolutely enormous. But the cost of game development is much, much greater than whatever money that they stole from their excited customers. The game met none of the expectations it set, and the player base, as well as the donations directly to the company, dried up practically overnight. And in 2024, the game is practically exactly the same as it was on release in 2018. Apparently it has received a few updates since then, according to SteamDB, but you'd be seriously hard pressed to figure out just what they changed. It looks exactly the same as it did in 2018. None of those updates brought any content whatsoever, and they didn't really fix any of the bugs either. The game has a tiny number of customization options in a so-called life life simulator MMO. The world is barely interactable whatsoever. You're just walking around a barren and empty world. Every time you go up to some sort of prompt at a library or a shop or an NPC or something, it will say coming soon on it, which would be funny if it didn't make me so unbelievably angry. Every time you walk too close to a wall, your camera clips directly into your face. And despite being an MMO life simulator, there's not a single soul playing this game at any time of day. So much so that I checked the Steam charts after I closed the game, and it looked like this. It's me. I'm the one player that just closed the game. It's me. I loaded the game. I created my character out of the 3 customization options there are. I walked around looking at a completely barren, empty world, and then I found a movie theater. And the movie theater was the only place in the entire game where you could actually interact with something. You could go buy stuff from this NPC behind the counter. So I interacted with him, and within 5 seconds of being in this menu, I looked at this poorly rendered tub of popcorn, and my game immediately crashed in the only menu I could find in the entire game. So that's the level of quality we're talking about here. Honestly, the fact that I spent money on this game, I gave the pieces of shit that made this game money to film this for 9 minutes, and it makes me so mad. And I missed the window to refund it because I'm just an idiot. So I gave my actual hard-earned money to these absolute vultures that did this. And the name of the guy who masterminded all of this is public information, by the way. It's this guy. His name is literally on the Kickstarter page. And may I remind you that only 2 people worked for Asylum Entertainment. However, their Kickstarter page makes it sound like a huge dev team that apparently had publishers and investors lined up, that you could even go and tour their offices despite the fact that they never had offices. It was just all a lie. John Vandersvet was the leader of Asylum Entertainment, and the Kickstarter was pretty much entirely his idea. And it's hard to say whether he started this Kickstarter campaign with malicious intent or not, but it's kind of hard to suggest that he began this venture with good intentions, since he was literally immediately lying about investors and development teams and offices and everything. If you ask me, he absolutely knew what he was doing from the very first second of this scam. And thanks to some really incredible investigative journalism from a YouTuber called Kira TV, we also know that the same John Vandersvet, shortly after the Kickstarter goal was hit, actually bought a house. Yeah, he bought a house. He bought it with a mortgage and then paid that mortgage off in its entirety just a couple months later. Now, you can never conclusively say that he misappropriated funds from the project to do this, but the timing is awfully convenient, isn't it? All of this adds up to a complete travesty of a game. People put their faith in this project and they donated $1.6 million towards it, all for it to be a complete lie. That's real money coming out of real everyday people's pockets, and it's money that they'll never get back. For some of them it's an insignificant amount of money, and for some of them it's $5,000. And quite frankly, the fact that these guys haven't been taken to court and sentenced to jail time for fraud is shocking to say the least. And this game, for some god-forsaken reason, is still on Steam to this day. I just hope no one is spending money on this disgusting piece of garbage. Now, this one is an interesting one, and I would have loved to, play it and show you guys what it's like, but I sort of can't do that because the entire game's in Chinese, with no language options whatsoever to change the language. The Steam page is entirely in Chinese, and the overwhelming majority of the reviews are also entirely in Chinese. Although some of the reviews are in English, and I think these people are a little bit lost, to be honest. They took a wrong turn at the Overwatch 2 page, I think. So I did load up the game, but I can't exactly say it went very well. Yeah, I didn't exactly get to experience the game for what it is, unfortunately. All I can tell you is that the main menu is kind of animated like that one Spider-Man Devious Bagshots gif. So all of my explanations as to why this game is the #1 most negatively reviewed game on Steam all come from research rather than actually personally experiencing it for myself. So, War of the Three Kingdoms is a card game made by a Chinese company called Yoka Games. Yoka Games made a physical card game called War of the Three Kingdoms, and they released it in 2007, and apparently it's really, really good. The game you see on Steam is essentially just a digital version of that exact same card game, and it's been out for a super long time, much much longer than it's been on Steam, and it's incredibly successful in China. But here's where the incredibly predictable downfall starts. The digital version of this game is a free-to-play game, but it's incredibly pay-to-win. The microtransactions allow you to just directly buy power. People who spend a ton of money on the game are just objectively stronger than you, with free-to-play players lagging behind. So the actual card game itself is apparently super fun, and if it wasn't a microtransaction hellscape, it'd probably be much more popular. But that's not where the issues end, because although most of the negative reviews don't actually mention this, there are other reasons the game is so heavily downvoted, mostly because of the community's anger towards the developer Yoka Games. In 2018, Yoka Games updated their engine for the card game, and in doing so, they didn't correctly port over all of the old user data to the new engine. So very large numbers of people who spent money on the game over years had lost everything they'd bought forever. Not to mention that the game is apparently quite buggy, and the bugs take a super long time to get fixed. And in 2021, there was actually a bug that allowed people to get unlimited paid items for free, and the bug was being exploited for months on end. So anyone who spent money in that time period just looked like an idiot. So much like Overwatch 2's negative reviews, some of the reviews are directly talking about the game, but others are mad at the developer themselves. So when the game gets announced that it's going to be released on Steam, people with a bone to pick take that as a great opportunity to voice their grievances en masse to the world, and that results in a game with only 11% of its Steam reviews being positive. But you might be wondering why this is the most negatively reviewed game. Like, sure, it's bad, but is it as bad as the other games on this list? You might think not. Hell, I mean, I don't think so. I think Identity should be number one, but I think the fact that the game is entirely in Chinese plays a large part of why it's the top spot, because a lot of games that are completely garbage will get lots of ironic fake positive reviews that skew the metrics massively. But because this game has gone largely unnoticed to the Westerners, there are a lot less of those types of reviews on this game. The only reviews left are the ones that are truly honest about what they think about the game, which is likely a big part of why War of the Three Kingdoms claims the top spot of the most negatively reviewed game on all of Steam. So that was our list, but before we go, I wanted to quickly touch on why the list was based on percentage of negative reviews instead of being based on the total number of negative reviews on the game. Well, the reason is simple. If we measure this list by the flat number of negative reviews left on a game, then suddenly the only games that appear on our list are huge blockbuster AAA releases that were just kind of a bit garbage. Overwatch 2 would still be there, but the rest of this list would be things like Battlefield 2042, or this Call of Duty bundle of 3 games. These have a large number of negative reviews, but they also have a large number of positive reviews, and they're also just not that interesting to talk about. It's just a poor launch, or nasty microtransactions, or high price tags, and that's basically it. But if you use the percentage, you instead get some serious, devious, garbage, bastard games, from Kickstarter scams to driving games that are so bad that it might be one of the worst games ever made ever. So this just makes the list far more interesting and feature a much more varied selection of types of games. And I hope we can all agree that that's more interesting for a video like this. And I also hope we can all agree that the developers of Identity should be in prison. Thanks for watching.